get started. Okay. So the Wabansi Foundation Scholarship Program, the foundation is actually a separate nonprofit that was established in 1976, and our mission is specifically to raise funds to be able to provide scholarships for students to use at Wabansi Community College. We have over 160 different scholarships that we administer. They all have different criteria. Our largest scholarship is $3,500. Our smallest is $250. On average, most of our scholarships tend to be around the $1,000 range. That's the typical average amount. A lot of our scholarships give out multiple awards. So for the 24-25 academic year, we're set to give away over 300 scholarship awards totaling more than $300,000. So there's a lot of resources available for Wabansi students. As I mentioned, we have over 160 different scholarships that all have different requirements associated with them. Some are merit-based, some are need-based, some look at specific majors, some look at the students' community service, extracurricular involvement. There's a variety of different things that our scholarships all look at. Each one is different. Nice thing is we have all these different scholarships. They all have different requirements. We have one online scholarship application for all of them. So when a student fills out our scholarship application, the software that we use looks at their answers to the questions, figures out which scholarships they're eligible for, and then automatically applies them to all of those scholarships. There are other scholarship opportunities out there that are available to students that work on a similar model. A great one, if you haven't checked it out yet, to go look at is the Community Foundation of the Fox River Valley. The Community Foundation is an organization that has a similar mission. They raise money to provide scholarships and grants to both students pursuing higher education, as well as other different community organizations that are providing services to people in the Fox River Valley area. So their scholarship program works similarly to ours, and where they have multiple scholarships that students can apply for by completing one online application. Their application is open right now. It's open through January 31st, I believe, is when theirs closes. So if you just Google Community Foundation of the Fox River Valley, you'll see theirs is open right now as well. So it's another great example, just to kind of show you that there are a lot of opportunities out there that operate on a similar model. And then, of course, you also have those individual scholarships that are being offered by specific community organizations. So a lot of community-based organizations will offer their own scholarships that they administer themselves, different Rotary organizations, Lions clubs, community-based organizations that raise money and then provide scholarships to students in their areas. They typically have a similar process to ours, to where there's an application, an essay, and then they select which recipients are going to receive which scholarship. So a lot of the information that I'm going to go over tonight can be applied not just to our scholarship program, but to a lot of those applications that your student would potentially be filling out throughout the course of this spring in preparation of trying to secure funds for the upcoming academic year, the 24-25 year. For our application, the first step is for the student to complete the new student application for admission to Wabansi Community College. After a student applies for admission to the college, our admissions office processes that application and then sends the student a confirmation email to let them know that they've officially been admitted and been assigned a student ID number. And then what we do is we pre-create an account for every student in our scholarship software. And so the first time a student logs in, what they're actually doing is they're activating an account that we've already created for them. We do that because it's just the way that we're able to structure our software. It's one, it's more secure, and two, we're able to pre-fill in anything that a student's already told us on their application for admission. So every college handles that process a little bit differently. Some have a specific separate scholarship application. Some colleges make it a part of the financial aid process. Some base it on transcript information. Every college handles it a little bit differently. So any college that your students are considering, In addition to private scholarship opportunities that are being advertised in your local communities through the guidance office at the high school and things like that, you definitely also want to specifically check with the colleges that your student may be interested in to see what their process is for applying. Is there any additional steps needed from the student beyond an application, a FAFSA, anything else beyond that? It's also important to pay attention to deadline dates. So as you can see here up on the screen, we actually have two deadlines. Some of our scholarships have an early deadline in February, others have a later deadline in May. If a student gets their application and all required materials submitted by our February 5th deadline, that one application is good for all of our scholarships. The student doesn't have to apply a second time to be considered for those scholarships that have a later deadline in May. They just only have to apply the once. If for whatever reason the student misses the February 5th deadline, they can absolutely still go ahead and apply all the way through May 13th. They're just only going to be eligible for consideration for those scholarships that have that later deadline. So I always like to encourage students, if at all possible, to try and make sure to get their application and all their materials submitted by February 5th, because that maximizes the number of scholarships that they can be considered for through the Waubonsie Foundation, which in turn increases their likelihood of being selected for a scholarship. So deadline dates are very important. There's nothing more heartbreaking for us when, we can see a student's been working hard on their application and they miss the deadline date. And at that point, there's, unfortunately nothing that we can do about it because it's a published deadline date that we have to hold to in fairness to all students. So, we don't want to deprive students of the opportunity of being considered for scholarships, but those deadline dates are really important. So make sure that you're keeping track and setting reminders for yourself when you're looking into scholarship opportunities to make sure that you're getting everything submitted on time. Our scholarship software, our scholarship portal is accessible from our website. So if you want to visit waubonsie.edu/foundation scholarships, we have some handouts there. We also have tutorial videos. So a lot of the information that I cover tonight, including information on writing a strong scholarship essay, we have some tutorial videos that we've filmed and posted to our website. So, just like this presentation is going to get shared, if you want to check out our website and take a peek at those tutorial videos. You can select some shorter clips. We segmented them out. So if you want to only look back at the scholarship essay tips, you could do that. If you want to look at how the application process works, you could do that. We've got some great resources out there. And then, of course, we have the link that will take students directly to our scholarship application software. As I mentioned, when students log into our software for the first time, they're activating an account that we've created for them and assigning a password to it. Once they log in and they start filling out the information, these are the sections that they're going to see. And a lot of this is pretty standard for most scholarship applications that you'll see out there. They ask a lot of questions related to these kind of broader areas. Some go more in depth than others. It usually depends on how many scholarships they're offering. So we first and foremost have academic information. So this is things like, what are the students' plans for their college career? Are they planning to be full-time or part-time? Are they planning to transfer on after their 2 years at Waubonsie to pursue a bachelor's, or are they going to go straight into the workforce after they complete their associates? Those kinds of things. On some other applications, would also be where you would indicate if you have the applicant would indicate if they have a major that they've decided on. We pull that in automatically from the college's system. Like I said, a lot of the information on our scholarship application, if the student's already told us that based off of their application for admission, we fill that in based on what they've already shared with us. For outside organizations, like say, for example, a community foundation, obviously they don't have access to that. So those are the kinds of things you're going to have to answer for them. We do also require every student to upload an unofficial transcript. So the college has to collect official transcripts for the purposes of admissions. For security reasons, official transcripts access to those are limited to specific departments at the college. So for the purposes of the scholarship application, we do ask every student to get a PDF of their unofficial transcript from their high school if they're a current high school student, or from their most recent college if they are a returning student who's already attending college, either at Waubonsie or somewhere else. Then we have financial information. Most of our scholarships don't have any kind of citizenship or permanent residency requirement. That is going to vary from organization to organization. Some will require that, some won't. It just depends on the scholarship organization, the donor, and what they've set as the criteria for the scholarship. But because we only have a couple of scholarships out of 160 that do have U.S. citizenship as a requirement, we don't require our applicants to file a FAFSA to be eligible to be considered for our scholarships. If a student wants to be considered for our scholarships that are based on financial need, they do need to file a FAFSA. But if they choose not to, then they could be considered for any of our other scholarships that don't look at need as a component. So we do ask students, because we don't require a FAFSA, we do ask students to self-report some very basic financial information, including things like whether or not they work, what the student's estimated annual income is, parent annual income if they're dependent, how many people live in the household in the upcoming academic year, and of those people, how many will be in college. And that's really kind of it. We do keep it very basic. Other organizations may go even more basic than that. Some ask only what is the total household income. Some may require you to file a FAFSA or the Common App and provide some specific information from that. It just depends on the organization. So just pay attention to what they're asking you. It will vary from application to application. Some, if they only offer one scholarship and financial need is not a component, may not ask for any financial information. It just depends on what the requirements of the scholarship is. Then next, for our application, we have the general information section, which, as I mentioned earlier, the way our application works is after a student fills it out and submits it, the software looks at all their answers, figures out which scholarships they're eligible for, and then matches them up to those and applies them automatically. The general information section is all of those little criteria that help the software do exactly that. So it asks things like whether the student participates in has done community service work, whether the student is, the applicant is a student athlete, whether they are in a union or their parent is in a union. Those are all things that are associated with different scholarships that we offer. So there are a series of checkboxes. The student just reads through them, checks anything and everything that applies to them. If nothing in that section applies to them, they just check none of the above, and then they move on to the next series of checkboxes. We've got them all categorized. So different applications do that in different ways. Some do them as an individual question for each scholarship criteria. It just depends on the organization, how they have their application format. Then we have the essay section, which I'm going to go into more depth in that in just a second here. And then we have the letter of recommendation, which I'll also touch on after we go into essays. So that's the overall structure of our application. These are pretty standard sections that you'll see on most scholarship applications that you're going to fill out. As I mentioned, some applications go into more depth. Some keep these very, very high level and may ask for very minimal information. Just depends on the scholarship. But just be prepared that you may get asked this kinds of information. So essays. What we did on our application to try to make the essay section a little bit easier to tackle was we took the components of a good scholarship essay and we broke it down into 6 long answer questions. So each of these is actually one question in the essay section on our application. So I always like to recommend to students, if you're doing our application, to save your responses to these prompts, because when you take each paragraph and you combine them together, you have a whole complete essay that you can use as a template for other applications as well. So this is a good structure to keep in mind when you're thinking about writing an essay, a template for scholarship application essays. First and foremost, an introduction. Telling our scholarship committee a little bit about you as the applicant, helping them get to know you, what your background is, your interests, maybe a little bit about your family, whatever you feel like sharing to help the committee get to know you as the applicant. I always like to encourage students to feel free to get creative here. With scholarship application essays, a lot of the time, depending on the size of the scholarship program, our scholarship committee could be reviewing a scholarship committee could be reviewing dozens to sometimes hundreds of applications. So, infusing a little creativity into your scholarship essay, goes a long way towards helping you stand out. I had a student a few years ago who I worked with for the introduction. Her career goal was to become a music therapist. So she had this running theme of music through her whole essay. And in her introduction, she talked about how she fell in love with music as a kid, her favorite genres, her favorite artists, the instruments that she played. That was what she was passionate about. So that was how she introduced herself to our committee. After that, we have goals. So this can be educational and or career goals. What I always like to share with students here is that it's okay to say that you don't know or you don't have all of the details necessarily figured out. Um, when you're talking about educational and career goals, a lot of times it does depend on the institution. And specifically at Wabansi, one of the advantages of attending community college is that students can take courses in different areas at a reduced tuition cost to figure out what the best fit is for them. So if that's how the student is planning to use their time, that's absolutely appropriate for them to say that in their essay. I had a student a few years ago. He was interested in both business and computer science, wasn't sure exactly whether he wanted to major in one, the other, or do a double major in both. So he was using his time at Wabansi to take some introductory courses in both areas to see if one or the other was a better fit for him. And he said that in his essay, and that's absolutely fine because that was part of his plan. He had some goals that he was looking to fulfill to get him to the next step in his educational journey and eventually establishing himself in a career. And that was what he explained in his section. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We don't expect every student to, have the next 10 years of their life mapped out, especially, students who are just graduating high school. If a student knows exactly what they want to major in and exactly what career path they want to pursue, that is great. They should absolutely write about that. But, that's not necessarily the case for everybody. And so what we want to see is, what the students' goals are, what their plans are, even if that plan is, trying to figure out what their future looks like and using college as an opportunity to position themselves to find that future. After that, we have accomplishments. So awards, certificates, recognitions, any other achievements. I always like to, encourage students, think about what you're proud of, what you've done that you're proud of. I had a student a few years ago. She was a returning adult student. She wrote about her kids. Raising her kids was one of her proudest accomplishments, so that was what she wrote about there. I have another student that I've been working with this year on his application essay, and he was received an award specifically related to um, an engineering organization a student group that he had participated in. And so he mentioned it in this section that he received this award. And in his goals section, he, stated that he was interested in a couple different areas of engineering and wants to, narrow it down while he's in college. So, my advice to him was to expand on that accomplishment because, that was directly related to his goals, and it was a great accomplishment to talk about. After that, we have activities. So this can be community service, volunteer work, extracurriculars, employment, internships, anything that the student is doing outside of the classroom. Then we have obstacles. So this is usually the section of the essay that students struggle with the most. And I always like to point out that it does not have to be anything as dramatic as running into a burning building to save puppies. um, you know, if an applicant has done that, they should definitely write that. That would probably absolutely get them a scholarship. But a lot of what we see, obviously is not anywhere near as dramatic as that. We have students who write about things like being the first in their family to go to college and having to figure out a lot of things on their own. Financial hardships, learning disabilities, mental health struggles, financial hardship. There's a variety of topics that we see students write about as far as obstacles go. And what we really look for is, for students to talk about, the challenges that they are facing and either have overcome or are currently trying to overcome to be able to pursue their educational and career goals. And then finally, a closing. So this is where the student would talk about what the scholarship means to them, how it would help them reach their goals, and so on. I also like to point out this is a great place for a student to say thank you. Something as simple as thank you for taking the time to read my scholarship application, or I want to thank the scholarship committee for considering me for this opportunity. Sounds like a little thing. Um, but what it does, so our scholarship committee for the Wabansi Foundation is all volunteers from our board of directors, as well as faculty and staff at the college who take the time to, volunteer to read scholarship applications in addition to their jobs, their families, all the other responsibilities that they have. They take time out of their lives to do this because they want to help students and they really believe in it. And when a student takes the time to say thank you and show that appreciation, it goes a long way towards telling our committee that the student recognizes that this is a unique opportunity that not every student is going to get. Um, you know, for a lot of scholarship programs, there are many more applicants than what we have resources available. So for example, last year we received 538 scholarship applications. We only had enough funding to be able to give 334 scholarship awards. So not everyone who applied received something. So when a student says thank you and that they appreciate being considered for the opportunity, it does go a long way towards showing us that they would be a good investment of scholarship dollars because they're someone who would value it. So those are the sections that we typically recommend breaking down an essay into. My, last year, as I mentioned, we got 538 applications in. And I'm going into I have been at Wabansi 7 years in April, and prior to that, I worked in financial aid at another institution. So I've seen a lot of scholarship applications over the years. The ones that tend to be the most successful have a few things in common. First and foremost, tell a story. As you may have noticed by now, I tend to use a lot of examples from students who've worked with in the past because I think sometimes that can help make it a little more concrete and a little easier to understand some of these concepts that we talk about when it comes to writing a strong scholarship essay. So next few slides, I have samples from applications that we've actually received in the past. They've been redacted and private information obviously has been removed, but they've been sort of generalized for privacy, but they do give you a good sense of kind of what we're talking about. So when I talk about telling a story, your ultimate goal when it comes to a scholarship application is for the committee to remember who you are when it comes time to decide who to give money to. A lot of times what we see are lists, which you can see that here in this example. On the one side, we have someone who this was for the activities section on the scholarship application. Both of these were taken from the activities section. And the one on the left talks about, the student has volunteered at the park district, the library, Feed My Starving Children, Toys for Tots, ESL tutor, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, badminton, Interact, Future. There's a whole list here. Lists can be hard to remember. It's great to show us that you're active, well-rounded, but I always, recommend to students, pick one or two of those things that really meant a lot to you and expand on them. Tell us why they were important to you, what you learned from them, how they're gonna, that experience is gonna help you in the future. That story is easier to connect with and remember than a list. So the student on the right, was a student who, as you can see, she only wrote about one thing in her activities section. As you can see here, she and some classmates organized a fundraiser to help people who had been left homeless by a series of mudslides. They organized this race. This is really actually not the entire section, not the entire response that she wrote, but it gives you a good sense of what she was going for here. But she really did, she gave us detail. She told us the story of, what she and her classmates did, how they were able to help people, what she learned from the experience. She was remembered. The scholarship committee remembered her story when it came time to decide who got a scholarship. She was awarded, and we actually had her speak at one of our events. So that telling a story and giving our committee something to connect to when they're reading dozens and sometimes hundreds of scholarship applications does make a really big difference. After that, proofread. Proofread it yourself, ask somebody else to proofread it, make sure you use spell check. I emphasize that not because I'm picky about grammar, but the harder that an essay is to read, the less likely that our scholarship committee is to connect with the information. I've seen some scholarship essays where nothing, as you can see, from the one on the left, nothing's capitalized, there's minimal punctuation. I've seen some that go on and on and on like this, and it's literally just a blob of words on the page. It makes it very hard to read. Usually when I see essays like this, by the time I get to the end of them, the only thing that really stood out to me was how little effort the student put into it, and how hard it was to read. So you want to make it as easy as possible for our scholarship committee to connect with the story that you're sharing, and to remember you, and to show that you took it seriously. The one on the right was from a student who, this was a segment of her application essay, and her whole essay wasn't completely 100% perfect with spelling and grammar throughout the whole thing, but for the most part it was. She took the time to make it look as polished and professional as she could, and it made it easy to read and easy to connect with her. So taking that time to put the effort in does make a big difference. Like I said, nobody's expecting perfection, but they are looking to see that you made the effort. Make the most of your word count. So these two examples were actually from the goals section of a couple of students' essays. The one on the left, you can see I'm going to school not only for myself, but my mom as well. I plan to graduate from college and become an interpreter so I can help my mom and other deaf or hard of hearing people. Technically, the student answered the question. But, if we give 250 words to write an essay and you only use 50 of them, chances are you haven't really told us a whole lot. So, most scholarship applications will, give you parameters for what they're looking for how long or how short, minimum and maximum word counts. And so make sure you're paying attention to that, and that you're making the most out of, the real estate that you have available when it comes to word count with writing scholarship essays. As you can see from the essay on the right, this is a student that I mentioned earlier that was interested in being a music therapist. She shared, again, it's sharing a story, it's giving us detail, it's giving us something to connect to. So make the most out of that word count. Sometimes you have to ask yourself whether you've really answered the question. So again, these are both from the obstacles section of students' essays. From the first one, the student wrote, I think obstacles are part of our lives. We could find obstacles in our career goals, financial goals, relationships, but the idea is to solve that obstacle. In every obstacle we find in our lives, we learn new things, so on and so forth. If you read that, when you get to the end, what you may notice is the student never actually talked about an obstacle that they faced. What they have written, it's well written. The grammar is good. It's spelled correctly. The student is a good writer, but they haven't actually answered the question. So, taking the time to really understand what the essay is asking you for, and then to look back at your answer and say, okay, have I accomplished what the scholarship provider is asking me for? Have I answered the question? Have I made sure that I'm giving them the information that they're looking for? It's very important that, if there's a specific thing that the scholarship provider is asking for you to talk about, that your answer addresses that so that they're able to make a decision and consider you, because sometimes if you don't truly answer the question, it can disqualify you from being considered for the scholarship. So make sure that you're looking at that. And then finally, word choice. The way that you phrase things can sometimes have a big impact. Um, these are both from the closing on a couple of student scholarship essays. Again, the one on the left, when the student is talking about how the scholarship would help them, they say, scholarships are what help us all be able to get our education and what we need to become successful. To anyone, the scholarship means a lot. I haven't done as much community service as was advised. However, I'm a hard worker and I feel that I do fall in the group who deserves a scholarship. It's not really very specific to the student. I also generally encourage students to avoid using words like deserve. It's a fine line balancing, being humble while still, trying to talk up why you would be a good candidate for a scholarship. But as I mentioned before, last year we had 538 applicants and only enough money to give 334 awards. So we have, a number of students who were strong applicants that weren't able to receive anything. So, it's important to, talk up your accomplishments and why you would be a good investment of scholarship dollars, keeping in mind the fact that we have a lot of strong applicants. So rather than focusing on why you deserve a scholarship, focus on, your choice of words on how it would help you, how you would make good use of the dollars, and how you would, commit to your education and your future, and why that would be important. As you can see, the one on the response on the right is very personal and specific to the student. They're talking, specifically about what their challenges are, how the scholarship would help address it, their goals for the future, and how the scholarship would help them get there. They're both well written. When you look at, stylistically and accuracy, they're both well written, similar length, but just the content of them, the words that are being chosen, the appreciation that's being shown in the one on the right, it does make a big difference. It can be subtle, but it does make a big difference. And if you're ever not sure about the tone of what you've written and how it's coming across, ask somebody else to take a look at it for you. Sometimes having that outside perspective from someone who can give you that feedback can make a huge difference. Okay, so that's my deep dive into scholarship essays. Just a couple other last minute things. As I mentioned earlier on, we do require each applicant to provide an unofficial transcript for us. Something to keep in mind, especially with institutional scholarships that may be offered by a college that your student is interested in applying to. They may sometimes require an official transcript. There are some organizations may be very specific about format, recommended versus required. For example, with our application, where the students upload their unofficial transcript, we do require a PDF, just because it's kind of universally accessible from desktops, laptops, Macs, PCs, all of that. But every organization is a little bit different. They may accept JPEGs, they may accept Word documents. What's important is to make sure that you're looking at applications carefully, and when you're providing documents that you're doing it in the format that the scholarship organization has specified on the application itself. So make sure that you're following instructions, because a lot of times there's a reason behind it. Whether that comes to readability, accessibility, things like that. So just make sure you're following instructions. Finally, letters of recommendation. Every organization handles that a little bit differently. Some scholarship opportunities will not have any letter of recommendation component associated with them. Some may ask for very specific letters of recommendation. Sometimes they'll ask for professional references, academic references, personal references. It just depends on the organization and what the scholarship provider and what they're looking for. So again, you just want to make sure that you're closely reading instructions and looking at that. So for our application, we only ask for one letter of recommendation, and our criteria is that it can come from anyone as long as the person's not a friend or family member. So we don't accept personal references, but we will take references from teachers, counselors, social workers, coaches, bosses, extracurricular advisors. I had a student last year ask me if her therapist could write a letter of recommendation, and I said absolutely. The general rule of thumb when it comes to letters of recommendation is that the student should be asking someone who knows them well and can speak to why they would be a good candidate for a scholarship. I mentioned personal references before. Generally, personal references aren't advisable unless the scholarship application is specifically requesting one. So keep a close eye out on what the scholarship allows and what it requires and what it's asking for. I always tell students, make sure that you're asking in advance of any application deadlines, verifying the person's preferred contact information, because how letters of recommendation are provided can vary from application to application. Sometimes it's an actual physical letter. Sometimes it's done electronically. So for example, with our application, since we do everything electronically, when the student's filling out our scholarship application, in the letter of recommendation section, they put in their reference's name and email address. And then as soon as they hit save, the reference will get an email with instructions and a personalized link that will allow them to upload the letter of recommendation directly to the student scholarship application. So we do everything electronically. Some organizations that may only have one scholarship and don't have a software that they work through may request a physical paper letter of recommendation. It's important to keep in mind when you're doing applications, keeping in mind deadline dates and format so that you can make sure that everything's being provided in a timely fashion. You want to ask the person plenty of time in advance so that they have enough time to write a strong letter of recommendation and they're not scrambling to pull something together at the last minute. If an application allows more than one letter of recommendation, I generally recommend to students to consider picking people that know you in different ways. So if there is an application and it will, they don't specify who the reference needs to be, and they allow, say they allow 3, it might be a good idea to ask a teacher, a boss or extracurricular advisor, a coach. Those people all know the student in different ways and can offer different perspectives. So, if you're allowed more than one, rather than asking 3 teachers, might be a good idea to ask 3 people that know the student from different areas of their life. And then, of course, it's always a good idea to make sure to follow up with a reminder. If you're waiting on a letter of recommendation and the deadline's coming up, make sure that you're following up with reminders and saying thank you. It takes time and effort to write a good letter of recommendation. So if someone, says yes to that request and writes you a strong one, it's, saying thank you and showing your appreciation is really important when it comes to that. So this is the contact information for our office. My phone number and email address is right there on the screen. I always like to encourage, families and students and parents to reach out to us if you have any questions, you need advice or want feedback, not just specifically about the foundation scholarship application, but if you have questions about, the process in general, I'm happy to help guide you to answer the question myself or guide you to the appropriate resources to help get you the information that you need. So, I'm happy for people to reach out to me at any time. And at that point, that is the bulk of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I know I just threw a lot of information at people in a very quick amount of time. I can share the slides with Ms. Ozarka, and then I'm sure they have a way that they can share it out with with the attendees or with the students to share with their parents. But yes, I will make sure that the slides are shared. And as Mrs. Zarka said, she is recording and we'll share the presentation out as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it will be uploaded for all the students on the Student Services Canvas page, so they always have access to it. Her last year's presentation is actually already on there. And so, yeah, I will email out all senior parents the recording and the link to the slides. All right, well, we can wrap it up here. If you guys do have questions, you can always email me. I can reach back out to Stephanie if I need to. Like I said, all the seniors are going to have an assembly on Monday. So if you want to ask them questions about what they learned, because maybe you have picked up some things, and encourage them to make sure they check our scholarship, our local scholarship spreadsheet to see what they qualify for on there. As she said, there's a lot of local community-based organizations that are giving our students money. And then, of course, the Foundation Scholarship. If you do have any questions or you're struggling to get on, have your student come see me 4th through 7th period, typically every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I am more than happy to help. But at that point, I think we're wrapping it up and we can call it a night.
Thank you. And thanks for everybody for joining, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.